All right, you're very welcome along to this special Huddle breakdown episode because we are looking ahead to a game as opposed to looking back at a game for once. We're looking ahead to the Falkirk game, the Scottish Cup. We're going to be finishing off the Scottish Cup by the end of the year, and Falkirk is up for Celtic. Jacob James and Alan Morrison are with me as always, lads. How are you doing?
All right, thank you.
Good. And I want to declare up front that this is an honorarium episode for Alan, given his affinity for Falkirk.
Yeah,
So
I have to declare. I was born in Falkirk actually, and before I was allowed to go through to Celtic Park on my own as a very wee boy, I just love football, right? So I went to Falkirk matches quite a lot when I was sort of 9, 10, 11 years old, sort of thing. So I do, and a lot of friends who are Falkirk fans. So not many Celtic fans in Falkirk, I will be honest with you.
You can imagine.
Not many at all.
Yeah.
I think I didn't find any actually, apart from me. But no, I know there are a few, but not too many. So yeah, I've always had a bit of a bit of a soft spot for them. So just declaring that now.
So that's our cards on the table. Unlike the mainstream media or us fan media, we're going to put our biases on the table before we actually get started. In terms of Falkirk, actually, this is complete tangent. We'll get into the game, I promise. But I'm fascinated by the geography of Scotland because it's such a vast area of just unknown. What's Falkirk like?
It's kind of stuck in the middle, pretty much between Glasgow and Edinburgh. So it's but the way that the geography has gone in recent years is that the Edinburgh has become so increasingly expensive to live in that the suburbs of Edinburgh have now expanded, and even Livingston and places like that, and I'm pretty much swallowed up most of Falkirk as well. So it's almost become like a satellite of Edinburgh, but it's slightly closer to Edinburgh than it is to Glasgow. It's about 20 miles to Edinburgh and about 40 to Glasgow, but it is literally right on that M8 corridor. But having said that, it is very distinct. I mean, Falkirk FC's got a very long and illustrious history. One of those very traditional Scottish clubs. Its old stadium, Brockville, which is where I used to go, was one of the most famous grounds in Scotland. I mean, it was a tip by any standards, and it was one of these places that when it was full, it was just an incredible atmosphere, a real character, for a place full of character. I mean, I can literally smell the tobacco and the bovril and the pies and the stale piss cascading down behind you as we're speaking, kind of thing. But it's not got a great deal to going for it. It was home to the Carron Steel Works. So it was a big steelworking town at one point. That's all gone. It's still probably most famous industrially for the Grangemouth oil refinery, which is on the banks of the Firth of Forth there, and that's just within the sort of catchment of Falkirk. So that had that heavy industry sort of history to it, and then probably my family, my dad worked in Glasgow and he commuted through. It was quite typical of what a lot of people do.
I was at the time. I was wondering where the stale piss smell was going to come in, because all these old stadiums, they've got,
it's absolutely true.
They've got character, but every single stadium, it really, those old ones really stink of piss.
Because I mean, there was a brick shed that was supposedly a toilet, but literally people would just kind of walk up to the back of the terrace and have a wee against the wall, and of course it would always come cascading back down the terrace and again. Brilliant.
I also find it very funny because I've spoken to a lot of Scottish people and they always talk about Edinburgh being expensive. Now I was considering moving to Edinburgh, and trust me, moving from Dublin to Edinburgh is probably what it's like moving from Glasgow to Edinburgh. In terms of so moving from, if you move from Edinburgh to Dublin, the rate of expense would go up. Wow. It would be similar enough to moving from Glasgow to Edinburgh in terms of the price difference. So Edinburgh for me is a cheap city, right. Because of what I've experienced. But anyway, enough of the geography chat. In terms of this game, James, I know you've been doing some benchmarking. What are we looking for this game?
The place to start is obviously the lower leagues have been truncated a bit this season. So it's some difficult environment for them to operate in and to keep fit and train. So they're at the top of League One within that context, and I believe having just started back up in the last few weeks. They've
Sorry, James. They've had 4 matches since the second of January. It closed down.
Yep.
20th of March, it started up again. They've had 4 games in a little over 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, they've got enough of a game record to get some sense. They've pretty much been, against better teams. They had a cup game against Rangers back in the fall, which I'll talk about a little bit more because I think that'll provide somewhat of a benchmark for expectation. But, they've kind of played 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1 in those kind of games. They're big and physical, which I think is probably the most unsurprising characterization, but also an interesting interplay with Celtic, given some of the issues we've had with physicality on set pieces, et cetera. They've got some big guys. They don't have anyone that's huge. They don't have a 6'4", 6'5" guy, but kind of across the board in the forward positions and also across the back line. They're kind of 5'11", 6'1", 6'2". They have Salmon, probably, I'm guessing, would be off the bench. The old guy,
Does Connor Salmon play for Falkirk?
Yeah, the old.
He does. He didn't start. He's not started. Well, he started 2 of the last 4 games. So
yeah, like a bad penny. He keeps showing up.
Yeah, he's not done too much. In fact, we're numbers based, right? He's 2 goals and 3 assists he's had this season. There you go.
Yeah. But again, I'm thinking very narrowly, meaning that the likelihood of a League One side like this to put up any kind of a headache for Celtic, it's probably going to be if they nick a goal here or 2 on set pieces. I mean, and given our issues in that regard, that's the specific area that I see is where there could be an issue, and where a guy like that, if he starts, and I'd be surprised actually if they started him, given limitations in pressing and that kind of thing and defensively. But they could bring him on in the 60th minute, and all of a sudden, or the 70th minute, where they've got enough guys that are big relative to our size, where on your standard corner or free kick they just lump it forward. I'd be a little nervous that we could revert back to our normal issues.
I think they've got a little bit more subtlety than that. I think you'd be a little bit unfair. I think I would agree on the back 4, right? So they've basically got 2 guys at full back now who ostensibly are centre backs. I mean, they've put this guy Gary Miller in at right back, and they've got the lad Dixon, who was at Dundee United for years, who played centre back a lot of his career. He's kind of on the left, and then they have got two sort of big units at centre back as well. But they've got if you remember Morgano Gomez, that played for Dundee United and Hearts. I mean, he's getting on a bit now, but he's there effectively the defensive midfield player. And then if you remember one of the many Murray Park starlets, Charlie Telfer, that went to Dundee United from the original Rangers, and was heavily touted. I think he had a spell down in England. He's at Falkirk now. He's not a player who carries natural fitness in his body, but he's a neat and tidy, clever player. He's in the team. And then their biggest goal threat is a lad called Callum Morrison, who signed from Hearts, and he's actually their top scorer. He's got let me just double check. He's actually 10 goals and one assist, which is pretty decent.
And he's a good physical presence too, from what I saw. I mean,
he's about 1,400 minutes. That's pretty decent.
Yeah.
So he's the kind of their main goal threat. So I think there's a bit of subtlety there, but I do take your point. It is kind of rudimentary at that level, but.
And I didn't mean that in a sense of.
Sorry. Can I just? And the other player they've got who is actually quite big, but I would put more again in the. He's actually a really good footballer, is Blair Alston, who again played for years for St John's, but he came from Falkirk. I mean, he's one of those players when Falkirk had an amazing academy. He's one of those that by the time he'd reached the age of 20, he'd already got like 150 games under his belt. You know what I mean? Incredible. And he's back at Falkirk now, being released by St Johnstone. Now he's a decent midfielder. At League One level, I'd have thought he'd be absolutely,
right.
He'd be absolutely storming it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, the way I was trying to characterize it was, in a best case scenario for Celtic, I still see headaches potentially, given the kind of the physical profile.
Well, we're not a good team. I'm going to be really blunt here. We're not a good team at the moment.
Well,
let's be very honest.
I agreed, and that's my optimistic parameter. if you look at the game that they played against Rangers back in the League Cup, now again, it wasn't Rangers' number one lineup. So they had Defoe at striker, they had Bassey at center back instead of at left back. So that he was kind of played a little bit out of position, and I think it was Zungu as their number 6 instead of Davis. But again, obviously, huge gap in level, even with some of those backup Rangers players playing. And I mean, they beat them obviously soundly 4-0, but if you look at kind of the underlying stats, it wasn't a game that was an easy 4-0. And actually Falkirk posted a good bit over 1 in XG. Rangers 1 goal. So I think Rangers XG was about, I have it here, it was 2.45. But that included the Bassey goal, which was basically a tap in off of a rebound from like 2 yards. So it was like a 0.85 XG. So if you look at the total shots, I think it was 13-10 Rangers advantage. Falkirk touched the ball, I think 20 times versus 24, 25 in the box. So it wasn't, the level of dominance that you would, if you just looked at 4-0 Rangers playing a League One side in the League Cup, you'd say, oh, they probably absolutely obliterated them. And, I haven't watched the whole game, but just looking at it statistically, I don't think that was the case. I think they actually held their own with them, particularly in the first, let's say 50 minutes. It didn't look like, outside of that kind of one rebound shot, that Rangers didn't do all that much. So I think it could be one of those games where let's hope Celtic score early. And, we don't have a lot of set pieces where we surrender set pieces to them where they could, nick something early and then get us all nervous. And, because I'm not sure we're going to get out of this regime of fitness issues and depth on the bench to come in and have, game-changing substitutes or anything like that. So we're kind of stuck with what we've been stuck with. And I think there's been a lot of reasons to think that, some things have changed under Kennedy. A good bit of it positively, I would argue, as far as structure and utilization of Brown and that kind of thing. But, I'm a little nervous, and I think a lot more nervous than I should be going into a League One team at this stage in the season playing Celtic.
Yeah, so Celtic are at home as well, which I think is a bit. I mean, Falkirk play on what I think is a reasonably decent, artificial pitch. It's not too bad, but the stadium is quite exposed, and if there's wind, which there often is, it can be a bit tricky. I think the Rangers game was a home game for them. I mean, they are top of the League One by quite a distance, but that's not to say it's been a dominant season. I mean, 14 league games have played. They've only actually won 8. Right. They haven't scored. They've scored 3 goals on 3 occasions actually. They're not like romping through. These absolutely tortuous 1-1 draw at home to Dumbarton on Wednesday was apparently my pal told me it was just a nightmare. So that was their last outing really, and they did before the break. In fact, the 3 games before the season was ceased, they didn't actually win any of them in the league. Home to Airdrie, home to Partick, and away at East Fife, losing 2. So, they're not, even at League One level, they're not all conquering in that sense. And I think what that shows as well is that they do struggle for creativity. I think that's really been the big issue for them. So, as James rightly says, they'll put a lot of store on set pieces, which let's face it, every team against Celtic is going to look in that direction.
If there was 2 ways to describe teams that I don't like facing for Celtic this year, it's really quick teams who can get in behind and teams who are really good at set pieces or physical. And I think that's been an issue with Celtic over the last couple of years, at least. One positive looking into this is that John Kennedy clearly is looking at a more possession-based approach. And at home, you should hope that with the good pitch and good conditions, that Celtic should be able to pull the Falkirk less experienced players out of position a little bit with possession.
Yeah, and the speed of Celtic's play is significantly an uptick on what Celtic, because what Falkirk have got. Because even if you look at the mid, the back four is not quick, and the midfielders, although they've got some talent there and experience in Gomez, Alston, and Telfer, they're not quick. So they're going to struggle to match the pace. If Celtic get the ball moving quickly, McGregor, Christie, etc. Get that ball pinging around Turnbull, then they'll find that very difficult to live with. I'm sure. I think under Kennedy, we've seen a pretty consistent template. I think it's the right template. He's got the team playing the right way. We're not scoring goals. The ball's not going in, is it? I mean, every game we've had a decent enough XG. A decent enough XG differential to have won the game, and it's just not. We've scored 2 goals in those 3 games. So, in old money, someone's due a doing. Maybe it'd be a shame it would be a shame to waste all those goals in Falkirk, though. I think try and save some up for better opposition.
Yeah, I think that's the other optimistic thing is we're definitely due for some positive variance, as I like to say. So, this could easily be the kind of game where Edouard scores a hat trick, or, we absolutely pummel them kind of 5-0 or something, that kind of, even with XG that's, not tremendous, like a 2+, maybe 3, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, the base case here is still, a relatively easy Celtic victory. It's just when I think about the tails of risk and the outliers, I can see a scenario, where we could get nervous a half hour in, and then it could be a squeaky bum time, as they say.
So on that note, if this was a normal season and this was the third round of the Scottish Cup at home to Falkirk, I would have expected like 7 or 8 changes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to predict that isn't going to happen. I'm going to predict that this is going to be like the first 11, and it's going to be all out. And actually, if it isn't, I'll be very surprised.
Well, I suppose like Dermot Desmond. I know Peter Lawl's going at the end of the season, but I would imagine that they are saying to John Kennedy, like, this is go all out for the Scottish Cup, because if Celtic finish the season with a Scottish Cup, I mean, it's not the unmitigated disaster that Peter Law
softens a blow.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't take away the negatives of the season, but it does. It certainly does add.
Cup.
That's the one thing about Scott Brown leaving. It's a pity that they won't get to do it in front of the fans. Just before we wrap up, then I'm not really sure what we do in this situation, because we're not usually a preview show, but we'll go for it anyway. Do we do predictions? Is that what we do? James, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll go. Despite all of my concerns, because that's just who I am and how I think of things. Actually, I think it will probably be I'll go 4-0.
Wow. I always keep an eye on the international fixtures for Odsonne Edouard and what he does for the under-21s, and he was on fire again for them. Because let's face it, Odsonne Edouard playing against under-21s is just blatantly unfair. He's a European.
They're not 12.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, if you're thinking about like you wouldn't send Odsonne Edouard down to the under-21s and the Premier League's standard. Never mind the international standard. Alan, what's your thoughts on the game predictions for it?
I'm going to go with a gritty 2-1 for Celtic.
Connor, if Connor Salmon gets the goal, I'll be happy, to be honest. I as much as I'm supporting Celtic going into this game, I'm equally supporting Connor Salmon, because he's one of the cult heroes of Irish football. Right, so I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for Celtic, and I don't think it's going to be pretty, because
no, I don't think so.
I'd worry about Falkirk in terms of the physicality, but again, I know Hearts, they've slipped up in the Scottish Cup, but I just can't see Celtic slipping up to the extent where they lose to a team that haven't played since January. As bad as it's been, I just really hope that it hasn't gotten that bad. Hopefully you enjoyed this preview episode of the Huddle Breakdown. We might bring a couple of these down the track over the next couple of weeks when there's nothing else really to do apart from look ahead to Celtic games and look back at Celtic games. So If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can get us at Huddle Breakdown, or you can subscribe to the podcast or get us on YouTube as well, Huddle Breakdown. We've got a new episode on the 20 Minute Tim's Patreon page as well, covering a wide range of things like Nick Hammond, Scott Brown, and Eddie Howe potentially getting the Celtic job as well. So if you want to check that out, subscribe to the 20 Minute Tim's Patreon page as well. We'll chat to you next week.